It all began when I was 21. I was working for a small event planning company when I met Richard Vale. He was 32, successful, and married. I knew about his wife. That is one part of this story I will never excuse. Richard never promised to leave her. He only said he was unhappy, and I allowed myself to believe that made our affair less cruel. For 8 months, we met in hotel rooms, quiet restaurants, and an apartment his company kept for visiting executives. Then I became pregnant. When I told Richard, he disappeared for weeks. No calls, no messages, nothing. When he finally contacted me, he asked me to meet him at the executive apartment. A folder was waiting on the table. Inside was a bank draft for $250,000. "What is this?" I asked. "A chance for you to start over." The agreement had already been prepared. Richard would give me the money before the baby was born. In exchange, I would leave the city, never publicly identify him as the father, and never contact him or anyone connected to his family. Then he added one condition that was not written in the agreement. "If she grows up believing I abandoned her, she'll look for me," he said. "Tell her I died." I stared at him. "You want your daughter to believe you're dead?" "I want her to have a life that isn't defined by what we did." He would return to his wife and his comfortable life. I would disappear with the evidence. I should have refused. But my mother was sick. I had no savings, and my salary barely covered my rent. Richard had money, lawyers, and a family name people respected. I convinced myself that accepting the payment was not selling my child. I called it survival. I signed. 2 months later, I moved to another city and changed my surname. My daughter Lila was born that winter. Richard did not call. He did not send flowers. He did not ask whether she was healthy. We were never in contact again. For the first few years, I did not have to explain his absence. Then when Lila was 4, she asked why the other children had fathers waiting outside preschool. I told her that her father had died in a car accident. "Did he love me?" she asked. Yes. The answer came too easily. That lie became the foundation of her childhood. I gave her one old photograph of Richard. I invented stories about him. I told her he would have been proud of her. I transformed a man who had paid to erase her into a father worth mourning. At first, I told myself I would reveal the truth when she was older. Then she turned 10, then 16, then 20. Every year, the truth became harder to confess. Eventually, I accepted that I probably never would. Lila grew into a compassionate and ambitious young woman. She studied architecture and eventually found work with a firm that restored historic buildings. That was where she met Evan Brooks. At first, Lila only mentioned a colleague who made her laugh during long meetings. Then Evan's name began appearing in every story she told. Their relationship developed slowly. They had more in common than either of them expected. They were both ambitious, careful with money, and determined to build stable lives for themselves. They loved old buildings, quiet weekends, and arguing over which terrible movie to watch after dinner. But the thing that connected them most was how they had been raised. Both of them had grown up watching strong mothers carry responsibilities that should never have belonged to one person. They understood what it meant to see a woman work, sacrifice, and pretend she was not exhausted. Lila admired how devoted Evan was to his mother. especially after his father had left to work overseas when he was young. Evan loved the closeness Lila and I shared. They often joked that their mothers had raised them to be independent, but had somehow forgotten to teach them how to stop worrying about everyone else. What began as friendship slowly became something deeper. Before long, he was joining us for dinner. Evan was thoughtful, patient, and easy to like. He listened when Lila spoke and supported her ambitions without competing with them. Most importantly, my daughter was happy. 2 years after they met, Evan asked me for my blessing to propose. "You don't need my permission," I told him. "I know, but I want you to know that I'm serious about her." He proposed the following weekend. Lila called me before the ring was fully on her finger. The wedding was planned for the following spring. That was when I met Evan's mother, Ms. Diane Brooks. She was warm, organized, and just as excited about the wedding as I was. We spent months choosing flowers, reviewing menus, and trying to keep our children from adding another 50 people to the guest list. The night before the ceremony, Lila stayed at my house. We sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by garment bags, makeup cases, and boxes that still needed to be taken to the chapel. She found the photograph of Richard inside her bedside drawer. It was the same photograph I had given her when she was a child. "I want to put this inside my bouquet," she said. I watched her secure the photograph beneath the ribbon. "He should be with me somehow." I nodded. By then, I had spent so many years living with the lie that silence had become easier than confession. The following morning, the chapel was filled with flowers, music, and more than 100 guests. Lila was upstairs getting dressed while I helped the coordinator with the final arrangements. A few minutes before the ceremony, a black car stopped outside. A man stepped onto the pavement. At first, I could not see his face clearly. Then he entered the chapel. My whole body went cold. Richard Vale stood just inside the chapel doors. He was older. His hair had begun to gray, and the years had changed his face. But there was no possibility that I had mistaken him for someone else. Ms. Diane hurried across the room. "You came," she said, embracing him. Richard barely responded. He was staring at me. Then Diane turned toward the altar. "Evan," she called. "Your father is here." Evan looked up. Richard looked at him. Then he looked back at me. Neither of us spoke. He crossed the chapel and pulled me into a small room near the entrance. "Why are you here?" I demanded. "I was invited," he said. "By whom?" "Diane." My throat tightened into a knot. Richard glanced toward the chapel. "Who is getting married?" he asked. "My daughter." His expression tightened. "What is her name?" "Lila." "How old is she?" 22. "When was she born?" "February 17th. Richard stepped backwards. "Evan was born on April 2nd. 6 weeks. Our children had been born 6 weeks apart." I stared at him. "So Diane was pregnant?" Richard looked away. "You never told me." "I was trying to keep my family together." "You paid me to disappear while your wife was carrying your son?" He gripped the edge of the table. "We need to stop the wedding." Someone knocked on the door. "Miss Carter?" The coordinator called out to me. "We're ready for the bride." Richard lowered his voice. "We should speak to them privately." But the music had already begun. Lila was waiting to walk down the aisle, and the man she believed was dead had just arrived at her wedding as the groom's father. Lila stood at the chapel entrance with her arm extended toward me. "You look terrified," she whispered. "I need to tell you something." "Can it wait until after the ceremony?" she said. "No, this can't wait." The doors opened. The guests rose. Lila took one step forward. I stopped. "Mom?" "I'm sorry. I can't let you do this, Lila." Her smile disappeared. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Evan left the altar and walked toward us. Richard remained near the back of the chapel. Lila followed my gaze. "Why are you staring at that man? Who is he?" I could not answer. She turned toward Richard. "Do you know my mother?" Richard swallowed. "Yes." "How?" Evan stepped beside her. "Dad, what's going on? Why are you here?" Richard looked at his son. Then he looked at the daughter he had never met. "Your fiancée is my daughter." No one moved. Evan frowned as though the words had reached him in the wrong order. "What?" Richard forced himself to repeat the words. "Lila is my biological daughter." Lila looked at me. "My father is dead." My voice barely came out. "No, he isn't." Her face collapsed. "You said he died in a car accident." I lied. "I'm sorry." Evan stared at Richard. "If she's your daughter—" He stopped. He did not have to finish. Lila looked at Evan, then at Richard, then at me. The truth moved through the chapel in complete silence. Lila and Evan shared a father. The man she loved was her half-brother. The chapel was cleared. Lila sat in the bridal room, still wearing her wedding dress. Evan stood near the door, unable to look at her. She demanded the full truth. Richard admitted the affair. He admitted paying me to leave. He admitted asking me to tell Lila he was dead. Then Diane confessed something I had never known. She had known about my pregnancy. Richard had told her before Evan was born. Her father, a lawyer, had helped prepare the agreement. "You helped pay me?" I asked. Diane's eyes filled with tears. "I was 6 months pregnant. Richard told me you were threatening to destroy our family. I wanted him to support his child. He told me you were demanding money. Richard had presented himself as the victim to both of us. To me, he was a trapped husband trying to protect his family. To Diane, I was a mistress using a pregnancy to extort him. He had needed us to blame each other so neither of us would look too closely at him." Lila turned toward Richard. "When did you realize who I was?" Richard hesitated. 6 days before the wedding, Diane had sent him the wedding website. My photograph was on it. So was Lila's. Richard had recognized me. He suspected that the bride might be his daughter. But he had said nothing. He wanted to speak to me first and find a way to stop the wedding without exposing the affair publicly. "You knew this could be true for 6 days?" Evan asked. "I wasn't certain," Richard replied. "But you were certain enough to come." Richard lowered his eyes. Even when both of his children were in danger, his first instinct had been to protect his reputation. Then Lila looked at me. "Did he ever try to contact me?" There had been one letter. When Lila was 7, Richard's lawyer contacted me. Richard's marriage was failing, and he wanted to know whether his daughter was well. I returned the letter and warned them not to contact us again. "Why?" Lila asked. "Because by then, you believed he was dead. You could have told me the truth." "I was afraid." "Of him?" I shook my head. "No, afraid of losing you." That answer hurt her more than the money. You thought I would choose him? I thought you would never look at me the same way again. You're right. I won't. A DNA test confirmed what we already knew. Lila and Evan were half siblings. The wedding never happened. Evan moved away months later. He and Lila did not remain friends. They could not separate their memories from what they had discovered. Lila stopped speaking to all of us. Richard offered her money, therapy, and a position at his company. She rejected everything. Money was the only language he understood when guilt demanded action. 6 months later, Lila agreed to meet me. She asked me one question. If the wedding had never happened, would you ever have told me? For most of her life, I had given her whatever answer allowed me to remain the mother she believed I was. This time, I told her the truth. No, I would never have told you. That was when she finally cried. I had told my daughter that her father was dead because I believed a clean lie would hurt less than an ugly truth. But the truth had not disappeared. It waited 22 years. Then it walked into her wedding and destroyed the future she had built.